4320.
If you have multiple user accounts set up on your computer, it's important to know about a feature called logging off. Now, I've just set up in the previous movie an account for Linda Weinman, and we know I'm signed on as Garrow Green, so I know there's at least 2 user accounts here. At the bottom, I can choose to log off the system, and when I do that, I get the following screen. There's an important distinction to be made here. You can also see that the background kind of goes to black and white, which is kind of eerie, but kind of cool, I guess. There's 2 options here, switch user and log off. Important difference between the two. If I were to simply choose switch user, it would take me back to the Windows login screen where I could choose to log in as Linda. It would boot up into Windows, but with using Linda's settings. It might have a different desktop, her files might be arranged differently, she might have different programs installed, all kinds of things would be totally different. But it would freeze my session the way it is. So if I had WordPad open right now, and maybe I was playing an MP3 file, everything would freeze in its current state. It would log me on as Linda. I could go in and mess around doing her settings and using her programs, log off as Linda, or switch back to Garrow, and when I returned to my session, my WordPad document would still be open, and my audio file would even be playing still. So that's one important thing to note about switching users. Everything kind of freezes and stays in place until you log back in as that user. Log off, on the other hand, does just the opposite. If I were to log off the system right now, it would close all the open programs, everything would stop, and then it would return me to the Windows screen. And that's useful if you want to get out of the system, you never want to come back, and you want to let somebody else log on, like maybe a member of the household, maybe a coworker, and you don't want to leave your account open, because if you leave your account open, that's still using RAM, and it's still using resources of the computer, and you may not want to do that. So switching users freezes your account until you come back as that user, and logs you off permanently, closes all applications, and takes you back to the welcome screen, where you can either re-sign on or sign on as somebody else. So that's the difference between the two, and something you should be aware of if you're working in a multi-user environment. Okay, well, we've covered quite a bit of the basics in this section. The last thing to talk about is how do you shut down the computer when you're ready to go to bed and go on with your life. Well, it's really simple to do. You come down to the bottom left-hand corner, click on the Start button, and choose Turn Off Computer. But when you do that, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I have a couple of options here. And of course, the background fades, nice for you. You have Standby, Turn Off, and Restart. Well, let's take a look at each of these. Standby is kind of interesting. If you were to choose Standby, the computer will freeze in its current state and remain that way even if the power is shut down. So if I were to choose Standby and shut the power off, and I had, say, WordPad open or Internet Explorer, when I turned the computer back on, those programs would launch in their current state, just as I had left them when I chose Standby. Kind of a very cool feature. Turn Off will do just the opposite. It exits every single program, shuts off everything in the computer, even the power, so that when you restart the computer, it's basically fresh again. Everything's been turned off, and you have to start over again. Restart does the very same thing as Turn Off, except that it manually reboots the system. It exits out of all programs, shuts everything down, and then reboots it, either the Windows login screen or right into the desktop like we see here, depending on if you have multiple user accounts set up. So just to reiterate, Standby will freeze everything you've got going on right now the way that it is. even if the power is shut off. And when you turn it back on, it'll magically reappear to the way things were. Turn off does the opposite. It exits everything, shuts the power off completely. And restart will exit everything, but reboot the system into a fresh session. So that's the difference between standby, turn off, and restart. Of course, you can cancel at any time and return to the very colorful desktop.